three trends that affect young men. Gaming is a substitution for healthy competition, pornography, substitution for love, relationships, sex, and finally online betting, which substitutes taking healthy risks, winning. All of that combined, we see quite a dangerous situation there.
You're listening to Getting It Wrong to Get It Right.
Ada, welcome to Getting It Wrong to Get It Right.
Hello, happy to be here.
We spoke like I speak to many of my guests previously. We have a little conversation, and what drew me towards yourself was a post on LinkedIn that was mentioned about masculinity. And I mentioned masculinity and toxic masculinity. And then people said, like yourself as well, that word toxic shouldn't be used, and it's right. And I'm been pondering around what is masculinity in the 21st century, and that's where I'd like to lead the conversation today. Can you define masculinity?
That's a very good question. So let's start maybe with thinking what has changed, because I think we don't question these questions. We don't ask the questions when things are obvious to us, right? Why are we talking about this today at all? Why is that a topic? Is because I think we as a society, and both men and women, are experiencing a profound transformational shifts when it comes to the roles of men and women in the society and in the family. So because we experience that something is changing, we then start questioning that. So what has changed? Let's try to figure out what has changed recently. And when I say recently, I talk about the last 50, even 100 years. This is nothing in the history of humanity. We are slow, but the changes have been massive. So what has changed is that previously, the main role of the man in our societies has been a breadwinner for the family. Even before that, protector, right? Physical force, someone who protects the family from the outside intruders, from the threats. So the man would be someone who's looking out for his kin, for his family outside of the walls of the home. And the women, traditionally, they were covering anything that has to do with family, home, and keeping everyone happy, healthy, nourished within those walls. No, that is not true anymore. What has changed is that women became more and more emancipated, something that I celebrate. I really find it very hard to imagine how the life would have been for me, even 50, 70 years ago. And women have started taking over more and more of those roles outside of the doors of the protected family, outside the doors of the house. So women are working today and have various roles in the society. We see them in all possible occupations. Women are running for the US presidents. There are women who are in charge of huge companies and are becoming these leaders, shifting from maybe being leaders more within their family to leaders outside of the family. So this is what happened. And the reaction to that, the question for men is then, what's left there for me? What am I supposed to do? And I think we haven't yet, or we're in transition where we're figuring out what is there for men to also do within the family, where the role of the father becomes very important, the role of emotional support for all of the family members, something that does not come naturally for all of us, behaviors and roles that maybe we haven't seen in our fathers. And that's why we're asking ourselves, so what is masculinity today? And I'm looking for answers to this question. And one thing that stood out for me, one very beautiful expression by Richard Reeves, who is the president of the American Association for Boys and Men. He said that he would like to tell his sons about how to behave in the society with this beautiful sentence that to be a man is the courage to ask a girl out, the grace to accept her no, and the responsibility to see that she gets home safe anyway. So that responsibility, that's on taking care of those around you, I think this is very crucial. And while the first few parts, I've experienced a lot of that, men who are courageous to ask girls out, men who are gracious enough to accept a no. But the focus is here on giving a chance and also making sure that men feel they're also responsible for those around them. This is a kind of a beautiful example that stick to my mind. What do you think about that?
You mentioned in the very beginning about family. The husband, the role is changing for both people, male and female, in the family unit. Do you think the family unit needs to be protected?
Yeah. It's a good question. So what happened with the families, and I think what we all experienced, that we shifted even in one generation. In my generation, family was not the 3, 4, 5 people. Family are our relatives, maybe even friends belong to the family, the grandmas, the cousins. So it was a bigger group of people who support each other. Today, it has shrunk to this super small unit that has to do everything. Parents both have to work, have to take care of the kids, have to undergo all kind of possible stresses that a relationship, marriage, having kids entails. And at the same time, we have a lot of pressure from the society to, also be attractive, to also have interesting hobbies, have an interesting social life, earn a lot of money, be happy. And all of that is, falling on us from the sky, all of these requirements, all of these ideals, or all of these fantasies. And the question is, how can a family hold it?
So I'll ask you one question before we get into masculinity is what do you think there's not enough of?
Not enough of in families or in our society?
Society, life.
Yeah. We had a discussion about this with a good friend of mine who lives in Paris. She has 3 kids. And we said that one day we will look back to the period of this phase of human development and we'll say, like, humans used to live like that. This is terrible. What a terrible idea was that? Look, 2 people in the family had to take care of their kids, had to work to earn money and sustain a relationship. Wow, in the past, we had this help from grandparents, support from everyone around us. And now we have all of a sudden lost it and we're left with ourselves. Like, we are the role models for the kids. We have to have all the answers. We have to have the energy, health to do all of these tasks. So what is missing, or what we don't have today, are the support structures that used to be around us for many, many years and many, many generations before us.
Yeah, I've often says it takes a village to raise a child, and that's a community. And society, for some reason, has led us down a path where the community or the essence of the family unit is fractured. And when something like that, in my opinion, is fractured, then it can cause great turmoil within society because people then are trying to figure out a way. Boys don't know how to be men and girls don't know how to be women. And because, they're not learning the yin and yang, the masculine, feminine energies that are in a family unit, and
how to combine them, right?
and how to combine them. Yeah,
you have to avoid this essentialism. Women are like that, men are like that. All of us have different energies, and we can bring one or the other, like the yin and yang you mentioned, when it's needed.
You mentioned as well that you have to be happy. You have to do this. You have to be a mother. You have to be a father. You have to cook dinners. You have to wash clothes. You have to pick the kids up. You have to, all these things that are bombarding people at this moment in their life, which they can find very stressful. Being a parent, and even when you're exhausted, you find the energy somewhere, which I find is amazing. And it's a gift that, when you have small children and you are exhausted and you're up all night with them, you still find the energy. And I say that because we have a daughter that for the first 3 years, maybe 4 years of her life, she never slept. And we realized that we were running on fatigue for all those years unknowingly, but we kept on going. Going then, looking at when you talk about, the wise words about what masculinity is about men. I've often said that, a man's role is to let women and children know that they're safe, and that's even safe walking the streets. Where when they see someone, not to feel scared, but to know that they're there to protect them. And masculinity is something that I think that a lot of young people are confused about. We had a conversation there a couple of weeks ago, and I was thinking about it, and I said jokingly, there is lots of women's groups and which are needed, but if I was to set up a man's group, there would be so much trouble, people going out. And as I was thinking about that later on, I'm used to, an era where there was men only golf clubs and men this and now the women, but young men coming up, they don't really see anything men groups. Like if you go onto LinkedIn, there's a lot of, women's groups or women in business, and they've never experienced the other side of what it was like when I was growing up, which I rejected. Why is there a men's golf club? These things, it's silly. But they're coming up and just seeing that. And I think that pendulum swings. And I think that you've done an awful lot of research, and I admire you for the research that you've done. And maybe we can talk about a bit what your findings have been. And even we can talk about that word toxic as well. It's defining it for the 21st century. And what does that role be?
Yeah.
But we can't lose the goodness of what our fathers were and our grandfathers and our great-grandfathers. We can't lose that goodness. We should embrace the good parts and pull that in to the 21st century and add parts to that make it absolutely amazing, and for men to feel pride and to feel, confident that they are who they are themselves.
You mentioned the word toxic and this labeling of masculinity of toxic. I think what happened, or like my reading of this, is that we became very aware of troubles that men have contributed to, and like we have to be open about that, and also understand that yes, women have been suffering under the dominance of men for some time, but there has been this kind of revolution in awareness of various factors about that. And of course, this is very important. I have been part of that, and I continue my work on women empowerment. But what happened in this kind of a little bit overreaction, I think, to that is that we decided that it's best to, out of a sudden, say that all qualities that are associated with traditional masculinity are bad. But like, who could say that something like, being present, being brave, sticking to your plan, sticking to your word, having grit, persevering, are these bad qualities? No, they're great qualities for everyone, for both men and women. But so kind of like we said, okay, so we have problems with that, so let's refuse the whole package. And that doesn't work, because that left us this kind of ambiguity. So what is there to do then? And of course, for boys growing up they're born in a society the way it is today. But if you grow up and you hear constantly, there are problems with boys, with men, they're toxic, masculinity is toxic, they have to change. What does it mean? So like, we have been talking a lot about how men should not be, but not enough about what do we want from modern men today, and how we believe as a society that it would be good that these members of society behave. It's true that, I have been mentee in a program for STEM, for women who are transitioning to STEM, because my background is I'm a serial entrepreneur in BIP3 and recently also AI, and I did something else before. So I profited from that. I've been on numerous panels, interviews, events, podcasts, because I'm a woman in tech. I have profited from this support that the society gave together, when we all came together and said we want to empower girls and women, I was on the receiving end of that. And I continue working on that. But in the past, I used to believe that just because some men had or still have in some areas dominating power in the society, it means that all men are doing great and all women need support. And the data, you asked about the data shows that men, especially young men, boys, are struggling. They're struggling at school. My son is starting school this year. I am, of course, concerned. I don't know how that's going to be for him. They're struggling at school from early years on, where they perform worse than girls. They have more troubles with tasks like reading, on average, of course, on average. They have more challenges to sit quiet in the classrooms. Out of a sudden, almost the whole, all teachers are female. And it is also proven that they see this behavior a bit different than male teachers. So the struggles start there. And there's a lot of research showing how this loss of confidence in these early years have impact on your confidence levels later on when you become a teenager. But so boys struggle throughout the school. Less men enroll in universities. Now, of course, I have entrepreneurial background. I don't believe you have to go to university. But if you want to, of course, I think it's a great thing. But like it goes this far that some universities already have positive discriminatory action, allowing more men to enter universities because they want to have gender parity. And some are saying that there's data from the US, some are saying that if they didn't do that, it would be, the proportion would be 70-30, 70% women, 30% men. What happens also with young men, they stay longer with parents. They start working later. In the UK, there is a big question that they're now finally addressing. Why is that the case? There is a few 100,000 of young men who are neither in education, nor in training, nor working. What is happening with them? Young people are the force of our society. We're built, this is the fundament on which everything is standing. We need that support, and people are kind of logging off, and that especially concerns young men. And then of course the online world. I just want to mention 3 trends, so that there are 3 trends that are related to the online world that especially affect young men, which is gaming as a substitution for healthy competition, sports, pornography, substitution for love, relationships, sex, and finally online betting, which substitutes taking healthy risks, winning. So all of that combined, we see quite a dangerous situation there.
Okay, so you mentioned there in the UK and probably in every country that there are men, young men, not working, not entering the workforce, and possibly getting some sort of social benefit. The question then, which brings up when you said that, is there a place that fits the word entitlement, that when things are given to us for something and we get them, we expect more and more, and we come in having a sense of entitlement, which then stops us from exploring?
I haven't thought about it this way. I think what I really connect this to is what many people talk about, investors. So I'm investor in startups. I see a lot of startups that are pitching for various funding schemes. And what quite a few investors have noted in the last number of years is this lack of drive, lack of ambition, and lack in self-confidence.
Yeah, I was going to say
Things.
Yeah, I was going to say the word lazy, but that'd be something that my father would say. You're lazy, give you a kick in the bum, get out there. So, I think, drive. And I think all those things drive our purpose, self-purpose, self-worth. I think they're the things. When you mention those 3 red flags, gaming, porn, and gambling, they're serious addictive problems. And that then brings up to the question as well, about, social skills. I remember many years ago, there is an obesity clinic in Ireland. And in the obesity clinic, they had three elements. Before they put this band around someone's stomach to lose weight. And one was nutrition, one was exercise, and one was motivation. And some of the people couldn't cook and had to teach them how to cook. But the biggest thing out of them says we can teach the people to cook. We can show them the exercise. The one thing that holds them back is the will, the motivation to do it. And has society created a generation that have lost purpose? How do we inspire young people to actually be better than what they are? I say this because I drum it into my own son and I drum it into myself that if you want to be successful in life, in my opinion, pick something and get really, really, really good at it and put your attention, the 10,000 hours, but, put your attention into it and get really good and become not the best, but become one of the people that are an expert in it. And if you do that in accounting, office work, mechanic, anything, people will keep you and hire you where other people won't do this, and you'll be the one. And always invest in yourself. So should we be teaching or educating or training young men to invest in themselves? And part of that will be the growth of, being the masculinity, to be, a better human being. So part of this discipline and focus, it's probably like a wheel that there's all these points that they need to focus on to be a better person as they mature. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think motivation is very important and it's the key word. And I have to tell you, I come originally from Lithuania. Now, these troubles that we see in the kind of the Western world, we don't have them in the Central and Eastern Europe. And why is that? Young people are super, super motivated in Lithuania. And I believe the same is true for Poland, for Estonia, and for many other countries that were in the former Eastern Bloc. And where does the motivation comes from? It's from the belief that you can create a better tomorrow, from the vision that I can do better, I can live better, I can experience more, I can travel more. Up until I was 18, I have barely been anywhere abroad. With my parents, we traveled to Latvia, which is close to Lithuania, basically very similar countries, to be on the seaside there, maybe to Poland, been once to Prague, and that's it. It was a huge thing when I finished school with 18 and we went to Turkey for holidays with my parents. That was a big event in our lives. And right now, believe it or not, like my parents are traveling everywhere. Okay, I live in Germany, so anyway, I'm traveling a lot. All of my friends are traveling. And we have experienced this massive growth in welfare and well-being within one generation. Also, Lithuania became independent. So we had as a society, big vision, we want to get to where Western Europe is. For example, the growth has been massive. Lithuania is the country that has the biggest GDP growth since 1990. So in comparison, it's still, of course, it's still not where Germany or France is, but the difference, that the leap is huge. So in comparison, we're doing so much better. Now what's happening in some of the countries in the West, I think the question is do young men believe they can do better? Do they have a vision? Do they see the opportunities? And why is this different for women? It's just because, everyone is cheering. You said all of these groups, conferences, events, scholarships, there's so much support in the public space for women, for girls, that says, go and do amazing things, and we're here with you. And we need that. We need to continue doing that. But we shouldn't forget boys. And I think that's part of the where should this motivation comes from? What are your thoughts on that?
I think a country, for Ireland, when we had the Celtic Tigers, so everyone was broke. We were in a country, and then when we called it the Celtic Tiger because we scaled and got lots of investment and multinationals. And I think that was probably a place where a lot of people then got so much wealth and suffered from poverty that they gave it to their kids, but they gave it to their children without understanding where it came from. And, as Jordan Peterson would say, great times make weak people and bad times make strong people. Maybe there has been, with the growth in the Western world, the financial growth, like no war, world war, since, 1940s to now is the longest peace that mankind has ever experienced. We know there's wars in small areas, but we're talking, on a bigger scale. Has that affected how we look at life? I kind of sometimes worry that there isn't enough voices to say to young men, here's my hand. Now, we also have the issue of men who will also be impotent and mean and bully, who will try and gauge young men and manipulate them in a way that shouldn't be. So there has to be the protector, and there also has to be the person. Is there enough Is there enough good role models for young people? There's the question.
And that's a question that's super relevant for me, and in the process of developing a program for schools for boys specifically. I don't yet want to talk about this in more detail because it's still before I want to announce that. But yeah, I'm asking myself, one of the questions is, what are the schools going to say when I say this is for boys only? How the reactions will be to that? Let's see. But what happened with role models? So traditionally, fathers are the best role models for boys, right? And many boys still live in families with fathers. However, we have more children growing up in single-parent households than ever before, and most of them are mothers, in case they stay with the kid much more often than dads stay. Teachers, good role model. There used to be a lot of male teachers, and they became less and less and less and less, and now we barely have them at all. Coaches would be traditional role models, but boys are less and less physically active. So what's left? And even if a family has an engaged, present dad who wants to do a lot for their son, there are these questions like how to be a man today that not everyone has the answer to. And I think, like, my thinking is, maybe there is no one reply to that question, like, you have to be like this or you have to be like that. It's about giving perspective that there are so many different ways to be a man, to be in a family, to be at work. And there are so many different paths one can take. But unfortunately, quite often young people don't see don't see these examples, because they spend more and more time online. And online, there are influencers who sell this dream of becoming rich, looking great, having all the girls, which is not. First of all, it's a fairy tale, it's a story, it's a beautiful image. It's not a reality. But I've seen a survey where most of the young people who were asked what they want to be and whom they want to become, they said they want to be influencers. So, and the problem is that most influencers earn nothing, and there are just very few that actually make money. And I know that I worked in digital marketing for my products, and I have very good understanding what the influencers get paid, if anything at all. This is not a sustainable solution for the future. But these examples and this kind of variety of perspectives and these open conversations are missing.
For anyone listening, an influencer is only something to promote a product that you have or a business that you were trying to drive. Influencer in a business in itself is nothing. Have a business behind it, a product, a service, whatever. And that's what it should be. So if anyone wants to be an influencer, first create a business that people need and want, and then influence on it. The other part as well, that's a segue for all those people out there. I think it's a case of screaming. it's a case of frustration. And maybe people want to be influencers and they role models because they're unsure. And yes, there are the internet. We think that we talk to each other on the internet. You message something and then someone messaged something, and that's not talking when you're messaging. That's as like just shouting at each other. It's not a conversation. The difference between a conversation is like we're having. It's a dialogue. If we were having this on text, we wouldn't be really having a conversation. And I think that's the problem, that they believe texting is conversation. And they've lost how to communicate with people. Like now it's a date app and go and meet someone in a bar and then see what happens. I had to go and speak to multiple girls on a night for, do you want to dance or do you want to dance, and be told to be rejected so many times. But that built resilience. My wife and going for a meal and then another date, and I didn't run up to my wife and go, marry me, because we'd probably be single if I did. But I think we've pulled away, and there's this phone in the middle that's blocking the communication of people. Does that make sense? Like there's this thing blocking people, and we're using this as the interim to communicate.
We have replaced many opportunities for young people, both girls and boys, to experience the life in its fullest, with its dangers, with its risks, with the uncertainty, with the uncomfortable moment that it's very uncomfortable to go one out because you don't know how they're going to be reacting. And we all have fear of rejection. I think some people have less of that, some more, but it's difficult.
Yes, it is difficult, but it was always difficult. It wasn't easy when I was growing up. You'd be in a disco and you'd walk over and ask someone, and all your friends are over here, and you'd wander over to talk to them, would you like to dance? And they go, no. And then you have to walk back to your friends and go, whoa. But
it's also responsibility of parents, trusting their kids. So we have this thinking that we have to protect. Nothing is allowed anymore. Kids are not allowed to go out. Kids shouldn't do this or that, how long are we going to protect them? And this was all like many trends in our society was all really, really accelerated by COVID, because it was this time when we were really closed. And unfortunately, after that time, also the data shows that after that time, not everyone recovered. And it especially really affected young people.
We live in analog. Everything around us is analog, and then we have digital. And, if you're stuck in a heavy motorway and you're trying to driving along, and when everyone stopped, you'll see them looking at their window, not the window out. You see people sitting in houses watching TV and looking at this window. The addiction of looking through a quick gratification, an impulse at that moment, which is giving endorphins into the brain, seems to be controlling society. And I lived in a world where we had rotary phones, but our new men and women that are growing up now have these things attached to them. It's like it's a part of their body, because without it, society won't let you function. And society is really trying to make you not function without this. But, as they bring in all the other digital things. And is that even going to destroy the old way young men and young women are dealing with mono? That's going to feel really lonely, even though they have all these things going on in the digital world. But in the analog world, they're just lonely and crying out for proper conversations and communication.
I think, we're a very adaptive species, and we're learning. So I think that we did this big experiment with, let's see, unconsciously, but like as a humanity, as a society, we did this big experiment. Let's give kids starting from 1 year old these devices, these dopamine shots, and let's see what happens. And I think it's the same with the situation of the family today. In some years, it's going to be like these movies where people are smoking everywhere. And you think, this is horrible. How can they smoke in the elevator? How can they smoke? So we discovered that this is dangerous, and we changed our approach, and smoking is really not accepted in many places now. it completely changed our view on that. And I think, just not to be like, not to get stuck in this like negative thinking, which I think we're very optimistic people, but we talk about the problems that we see. But I think there is a big awakening in when talking about this issue. So first of all, we have now plenty of research showing what's happening with mental health of both girls and boys. And I see schools all around Europe, at least, I don't know so much about the US, that are, for example, banning phones in schools, in the primary school. Right away, you enter the school, you leave your phone in a box, and then you continue with your day. And if something happens, your parents can call the teacher, something that was always a possibility. So I think like we will have more and more measures like that, and we'll get out of that. And I hope we will be able also to help those unfortunately caught in this experiment.
I know the secondary schools here where my daughter goes, no phones, and the primary school there's never been any phones. But they ask the parents to sign a pledge that the children don't have a phone till they're, I think it's 11 or 12 in primary school.
The later, the better.
Yeah, the later. The other thing as well is that it's convenient for parents who are caught in work and busy, and a mother and father working. And it's easier to give a child a phone so the parent can have 5 minutes to do something work-wise, giving it to the child. And we need to maybe educate the parents to stop for a moment. And, children's lives slip away and they're suddenly adults. And all those times you could have spent with them, instead of, none of us are going to be on our deathbed and going, oh, I wish I had another 5 minutes on my laptop. I made a conscious decision not to have a laptop. So I only have a PC in my office, and I do not have a laptop because I know I would be in the house pulling up the laptop. I don't have Facebook. I don't have Instagram. The only app that I have on my phone is LinkedIn. All those other social media apps I don't have on this.
And that's also a big trend. I think almost none of my friends are on Facebook anymore. Like I joined back in the days, I think 2008.
I have it on my PC.
Facebook anymore. Instagram, I left a few years ago. A lot of friends have left Instagram. Yeah, LinkedIn is maybe for some
It's
other
business. It's a Rolodex. Yeah.
Some people are using X, and everyone has their personal choices. There are good uses of anything. It's only when we talk about misusing and using that too much that it becomes dangerous. But I see a big shift, and a lot of people are talking about that, what's happening with our attention. Someone said that if you manage to have 2 hours of undivided attention dedicating to one topic, to the most important thing you're doing that day, you're already ahead of 95% of everyone else.
Wow.
How many people manage to put aside, or you have anxiety? Do you have anxiety when you don't have your phone with you?
No.
But we're always checking because our minds got used to need to just reply, just whatever. But I also don't blame parents. I have 2 small kids. I know it's difficult, and so far we managed. I'm very proud. Our kids don't have. My son is 6. We don't have TV. They don't have phones. They don't have iPads, and they don't have it when we go on long haul flights. Except if there is already a screen there, then of course I cannot take it away. There are situations. We had a 6-hour flight. The screen was not working. When we go on long car trips, there is no phone, and yes, it's exhausting. And I would love to just and I'm someone who is in technology full time for almost a decade, and I'm working with companies that are doing cutting edge innovation in blockchain, in digital, in Web3. And still, I think that for kids, it's best to not have. We even don't go to cinema that often. But even recently, I saw a clip. Someone compared TV to a phone, and saying that TV is a good thing. Where in the past it used to be, oh, you spend all this time in front of a TV. Now, in comparison to these dopamine hits for older kids, it can be beneficial. They can learn something there. But the phone is that you are manipulating the machine yourself. You're getting this word. TV is quite different. I don't have TV for the last 20 years, but even in comparison to that, some are saying already TV was so much better. So
Yeah,
there's growing awareness.
yeah, we don't have TV. We have Netflix.
Yeah.
Don't have any of the channels. We have none of the kids have iPads. You know, we had to make that conscious decision. But we had to make the decision. We couldn't just say you're not having a phone. We had to make a decision that it was interacting with them as well, and then getting them into as many sports as possible and that's teaching them motor skills, creativity, lateral thinking, all these things that we need them to drive. I'm gonna ask you a question. I've two questions for you. Three questions actually.
Three at once.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 50, 100 questions. First question I want to ask you is, if there's one thing that you could do to make a switch that could change the direction that men have gone, what would it be? One thing, one brave thing.
One thing, I believe if we could work with mindfulness in schools from early age for girls and boys and learn how to look at what's happening inside and understand our role in whatever is happening to us, be very, very powerful.
Yeah, it would actually. The greatest gift that I gave myself, and I'm being selfish here, that I wish I knew when I was 18 and 19 is awareness, self-awareness. And I think that's part of what mindfulness is. Next question. What did you get wrong to get right?
So I think one important lesson that I learned is that you don't always have to push. So I approach the world from this perspective that if I set my mind on something and I really want to do it and I really believe in it, it's all in my hands. I like this illusion of control, and I can push people, the world around me to make these things happen. And in many cases, I had a lot of success. However, I learned that it's very important to understand. I learned a lot when I was learning surfing. You have to choose the right way. You have to understand when there's no point, for example, trying to change other people. There's no point. You cannot change other people. It's impossible. There's no point to fight, to swim against the current. You just get tired. You cannot change the current in the ocean. There are other strategies how you get out of that. So I had to experience that painfully many, many times until I understood, okay, no, it's good that I have all of this energy, but it's important to check where I have to roll back or stop the initiative, stop the project, have a break in a relationship and wait and see what happens. Be in this vulnerable, uncomfortable situation, admitting it's not in my control and it might be not working out the way I wanted.
The pause between the breath, that's really what it is, yeah. That uncomfortable and getting out of your own way and letting things happen. You said the difference between society where women are taking one direction politically and men are taking another direction. Can you explain that to our audience? Because I think it's relevant.
This is something that got me into the topics about boys and men in general, because I have studied political science before I became entrepreneur. I saw that young people and that young men and young women vote completely differently, that the differences in their voting behavior have grown to such a level of polarization that is unexperienced ever before. So, for example, the latest data, we had elections in Germany, February this year. 27% of young men, 18 to 24 years old, voted for a party that is by some the protest party or a far-right party, AfD. 1/3, 27%. While 35% of women in this category, 18 to 24, voted to Die Linke, the left, the far left. So 1/3 of young people are not even able to talk to each other, because really, if you are on this spectrum, communication, relationships, friendships are very difficult. Some people manage that, but it's kind of the basic beliefs about the world. This is completely different for young women and men. And the biggest difference, the biggest polarization that happened is in South Korea. And you know what is South Korea leading in? in the world. South Korea has the lowest birth rate in the world. And that is incredible to believe how we ended up somewhere there. There's no war, there's no famine. It's an advanced country. There's enough of everything for everyone. And the population is shrinking. Number one country in the world with the lowest birth rate. And this is something where we have to take a break and think, how did we got here?
Does that circle back to the very beginning of our conversation when we spoke about the family unit? And the family unit is sacred, and the family unit should be protected. And everything that we should use in our society is to grow and develop that family unit instead of destroying it.
I think that has a lot of connection with the masculinity and what's happening with the young people. Of course, people can choose to live, differently in different type of units. We're in free world in many parts of the world, thankfully, but we're also dependent on the young people. And we also want as a society to grow together and not grow apart. And I think, unfortunately, this is what has been happening over the last 20 years. It has been accelerated since COVID. We have grown so much apart that it's concerning.
Something that I've been pondering about in the last week or so is that the rise of AI and the technology and the displacement that it's going to do with people and jobs. And, one part will say there'll be so many people displaced, we won't need them anymore. And then on the other side, they go, no, we still need, people to fill these jobs because people, how are we going to feed these people? And then you've got these basic incomes and it's coming into play. And something just hit me and, maybe we've manifested the reduce of population because AI was coming down the track and, to do a lot of the work that people had, has it been engineered in such a way that with the growth of AI, we'll need less and less people?
Yeah, I'm not sure that we're going to need less and less people. Let's see. But I know that we already managed one massive shift from, let's think, end of the 19th century, beginning 20th century. Most of the population were farmers in many places in Europe. And then within maybe 50 years, we got to the number where about 5% of people were producing food and others were doing other jobs. So we are very adaptive, clever species. And I think we're going to find ways to develop in other direction. And I think AI could empower people. So I'm not so much afraid of that, but I think we have to learn how to use that. And that's been one of my passions lately, learning and also teaching people to use AI so that it empowers you, does not replace you.
Yeah, it's, there's 85% of companies want to use it in their internal processes and only 5% are. It's a $1 billion industry, but it's also an industry that people need to look at as an assistant because all it is a machine that's learning. And I think just the wording, artificial intelligence scares people on it.
Yeah, I don't believe that there's this big argument, are we going to have AGI soon, or whether the current developments are, I think it's very far away from how humans actually think and learn. But that's my take, and have had quite long discussions with some leading AI engineers at the University of Cambridge, and they're very technical. They share this opinion, but I know some people think we might already have a AGI, but it's somewhere hidden. So I don't know about that. So I think it's very far away from this.
Well, we say that the military are 30 years ahead of us anyway in technology. So.
Well, let's see. But maybe we can do some of the work that we're doing now faster and have more time for kids.
Yeah, well, that's the truth. And I think that's really important.
I think what is important for me and why I'm so happy to have this conversation with you is that more people become aware of the challenges that boys and men face. And sometimes people are asking me when I talk about that with them, so what should we do? And, we can do many things, but everything starts with just acknowledging. And maybe that's for some, it's enough to be seen to be seen in their struggles, to be seen in this complex situation, to be seen that these men and boys, they're looking for answers, they're looking for direction, and they want to do their best. So just to believe when looking at anyone that everyone, deep in their hearts, we just want to do our best. And that's already a very good first step.
And it's okay to fail. And failing is part of life, because you can't experience the good things unless you've experienced the bad things. So it's okay to fail. And it's okay to say no.
And it's okay if a girl says no.
Yeah.
You can go and ask many other girls. And it's okay if business fails. And it's okay if you get a bad grade, As long as you keep on trying, you're going to get to somewhere.
Yeah. If someone wants to reach you or speak to you or have a conversation, where can they locate you? And give us your LinkedIn profile as well, please.
On LinkedIn, yes, Ada Jonuse. My biggest audience is on LinkedIn. That's also the social media that I use, the only one, and I'm easy to reach there.
Ada, thanks for coming on the show.
Getting it wrong to get it right.